This is Stare Down the Bull. I'm your host, Susan Hunt. Around here, we tackle the hard stuff: how to lead with clarity, leveraging AI, and turn strategy into real results. My guest today brings a powerful perspective on how to do exactly that. Let's dive in. On today's episode of Stare Down the Bull, we sit down with Eric Collins. His timeline is proof that you don't have to stay in one lane to win. From growing up in North Carolina to earning degrees from Princeton and Harvard, Eric made his name as an early key executive at tech giants like AOL and Nuance. He didn't stop there. He lived in Washington, D.C., even at the iconic Watergate, served in the Obama administration, then took his talents to London, where he evolved from operating executive to venture capitalist, television host, and published author. This is an incredible journey. Let's dig in. Thanks for joining, Eric.
Thank you, Susan. It's good seeing you and being
Yeah,
together after all these years.
I know it is really good seeing you and catching up and hearing about all of the progress that you've made since we last spoke, which is pretty incredible. We had a good time talking to each other a couple of weeks back about doing the podcast. And during that discussion, one of the things that really caught me is that you mentioned kind of the value of being fired and how each time this has happened to you, you've had bigger and bigger opportunities that have propelled you forward. I don't think we talk enough about the value of being canned. Can you
Mhm.
just give us your perspective on this? Because I thought that it was really important to hear.
And the name of your podcast actually helped me to think about this, Susan, because
Ah,
staring down the bull, it's just, you think to yourself when you get canned. I'm a person who, in my early life, had gone from, was sort of up and to the right. All things were leading to a successful outcome. And when I started working, not at my first one or two roles, but later on, it became very clear that from a cultural perspective, it just wasn't working. And there were several organizations, in fact, in a row that actually let me go. The interesting point that you point out is that, look, even though that door closes, that room is left vacated by me, there has been, and it's not immediate, but there's generally been a dip in terms of, and some sort of panic which has ensued with me,
yes.
meaning that it's like, oh, so how are we going to now? What's our next opportunity going to be? How long can we? What is our burn rate, and sort of how much money do we have in order to continue
Yeah.
to survive? And then from there, I have generally found a new opportunity that has been an you know, that has benefited from my past experiences, but is actually opens new windows, new doors, new rooms, new houses, new mansions, and all of a sudden
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it all takes off again. So that has been one of the things that I've noted. But if I had stayed in those positions, I wonder what would have happened. Because I don't think in any of those roles, I don't think I was going to become CEO of Nuance under any circumstances.
Right.
So staying there wasn't necessarily going to lead to an ultimate ending. So
Yeah, I think it just you become like in those situations, you just become like a robot after a certain period of time and you're kind of stuck. So I absolutely agree getting fired is a gift. And I think it also just allows you to spend time thinking, which you never have when you're working. Just
correct.
spend time thinking about where you want to go,
Mhm.
what you really want out of your life, and what you need to do to get to that point. Because when you're in it, when you're doing 12 hours of meetings a
Mhm.
day, you barely even have time to do the work you're supposed to do for your job, no less the time to really explore what would make your life great.
Yeah.
So I love that you think of it that way, and I do as well because I too have been fired a couple of
Mm.
times, I'm happy to say.
And I
You
would say,
also
can I
Go
say one
ahead.
last thing? I think it also helps you to assess your network in that organization and
Oh,
who
yeah,
you wanna take with you.
true.
Because there's a continuing journey you're going to be on. So who is right for the remaining journey? Who are you going to remain in contact? Who are going to be your business colleagues? Who are just going to be your friends and allies? And how is that going to then lead to something even bigger and possibly not just for you, but for them also? That's the other thing I learned from being fired, that it's not all about me. Oh, woe is me. There are other people who remain in the organization, et cetera. And that those people might also be helped by my sort of being a pioneer in a new organization,
True,
anything else,
true.
looking at a new industry, et cetera.
Yeah, we do talk about this on a couple of my other, podcasts in that if you are a good leader, if you are a great leader,
Mhm.
then even when something like that happens to you, and a lot of times when you get into an executive role, it's got a lot less to do with the quality of your work and a lot more to do with the politics of the moment.
Yeah.
So your people generally know that. The people that have worked with you and for you over the years generally know that, and they do keep an eye on where you're going. I've
Yes.
had many, many times where a lot of people have reached out to me after I've left and gone somewhere else, and we've recollected ourselves and made a new sales organization somewhere, or a new type of organization somewhere else. So that's happened many, many times. You worked at you I want to talk a little bit about chaos management because you worked early on at AOL, and
Mhm.
I'd like to delve into what that was like. I know a few people in DC that were at the very beginnings of that, and also Nuance. Like, which role did you love? How did you manage that really early stage? Like, this is the beginning of the internet, so this is
Mhm.
like really early stage tech before there was a playbook for anything, right? So
Mhm.
how did you manage that chaos, and what did you learn most navigating those different roles?
It's funny that you should mention that because I think now I'm in another period of chaos as a
Ah,
venture capitalist because of artificial intelligence.
yes.
But I went to AOL under duress. And another
Really?
time that I had actually left a situation, this one I had started my own company during just before the dot-com bust. And I got caught up in the dot-com bust, had put all my money, all my effort, all my relationships into that business. And then when it goes bust, what am I going to do? And it took me a while, but I landed because of some associations and some friendships at AOL. And when I went to AOL, I wasn't even in the major part of the business. Here is AOL, America Online, getting people to adopt internet behavior using dial up. I'm not
Yeah.
even in that part of the business. I'm in the mobile part of the business. So, and
Oh
this
my
is
god.
2000, this is 2001. So if you think about mobile in 2001, there was no iPhone. There was a BlackBerry
No.
device. This was the most technology forward device, and everything else was sort of a candy bar phone that was using, and you could play Snake on it and you could text a little bit, but it really wasn't what we see today. It was not that sort of handheld computing device that connects you to the world. And I'm not assigned to what AOL is making billions of dollars from. And they had just made so many billions that they had just actually merged with Time Warner. I came
Yeah.
right at the time of the merger, and the merger sort of working its way out. And in any case, I come and then they say, well, Eric, you're not going to work on that. You're going to work on mobile. It's like, mobile, good God. Now, and I thought I had been assigned to a backwater. So all that chaos is going on over here, and mine is even less. It was very calm because no one is even thinking about it. I'm in a backwater where we're thinking about artificial intelligence. We're thinking about large language models. We're talking about natural language processing. And I had no idea that I was being given the privilege of not part of the dying business that had already crested and was on its way out in terms of dial up, but that in fact I was joining the mobile division, and the mobile division, which had a technology called TGIC, and that's how I got to
Yeah.
Nuance. Text on 9 keys. How do you if you're a person with this is where it came from. It came from the disabilities market. If you have a person who has the ability to move an eye or a finger and you want to communicate more quickly, how do you get them to communicate more quickly? It's through prediction of what they are trying to do, their intention. And then you are able to spell out words, you're able to correct words very quickly, you're able to string together sentences, and therefore a person can speak, they can communicate much more effectively. That is the organization I joined, and it was doing 5 million of revenue when I joined it. It's like, and this is on a billion organizations making billions and billions, and is in the news every day. And TGIC is not even in Washington D.C. at headquarters; it's in Washington State in Seattle. So
Yes.
I'm like, boy, I'm really in a backwater. I'll never make it into this through this organization. But lo and behold, because for who knows, for whatever purpose, I end up there, and I'm therefore at the forefront of mobile. I'm at the forefront of embedded technology. I'm at the forefront of artificial intelligence, and my reputation is made at that particular point because not only had my business failed as a technology business during the dot-com crash, not only had I been relegated to Washington, D.C., where I didn't want to actually be, in a company I didn't want to work in a division of that company that I thought was horrible,
Yeah.
it becomes absolutely the opportunity that made the difference. And that's no bull. That's exactly
Yeah.
what happened.
That's amazing. And then
Mhm.
so TGIC was bought by Nuance,
Correct.
and you moved in, and that's where you and I met each other a very long time ago. But as far as the mobile stuff, that really, like, that was bleeding edge at the
Mhm.
time, like, totally bleeding edge. I remember being at Nuance, and this is years in, and it's still being bleeding edge because it was such a complex problem. It was clear, everybody was clear that it was gonna be massive,
Right.
but I don't think anybody was super clear how we were gonna get from point A to point B, and then Apple made it a lot clearer suddenly.
Suddenly.
Yeah, and then it all made a lot more sense, but, I mean, my background, as you know, is telco, so before I
Mhm.
went to Nuance, I was actually at Sprint PCS doing that startup 10 years into the
Mhm.
cellular thing, right, and had worked for Motorola before that, so, um, not that I was a big visionary because I could never see, like I could see, like, 5 years in. I never saw the big picture on anything, to be honest with you. When I was selling for Motorola, I was like, the very one of 6 people that were selling in the presale in Chicago, which had like a 100-year waiting list for phones. And I would be like, of course, I was about 22 years old. I would be like, well, this job's only going to be good for a couple of years because really, how many rich people are there?
Yeah.
That was my thinking. Like, there's no way I could have foreseen what was going to happen with mobile.
But
Um,
don't you think, Susan, that your experience there and sort of being in that environment and not necessarily having a pathway, not necessarily seeing sort of the way forward, allows you to be a bit more fluid and to sort of go with the flow a little bit. And
yes,
because you're going with the flow, you are able to sort of experience a number of things that you might not have otherwise designed into your plan. And I think that kind of, playing, it's sort of like when you're playing tennis. Some people are very good offensive players. Sometimes you're defense. You just got to get the ball back and play. And so in some of these, I'm just playing defense. I'm just letting things happen. I'm just
yeah,
trying to make sure that I can keep the ball in play. But eventually, it allows me to get on the front foot, and then there's something that can actually be done from there. And I found that not necessarily having a path that I had a huge amount of confidence in, not that I thought that this was the place to be, but then trying to construct from the cards that I had a winning hand.
yes.
It allowed to do things that I would not have otherwise planned, and that has been very advantageous.
I think it also goes directly to really living life.
Hmm.
My family wasn't like, look, this is your structure. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to be. This is where you're going to go. This is where you're going to live. They were like, get a job. Okay.
Hmm.
Get a job, kid. And that's what I did. And from that, because of that, I wasn't brought up in this environment where it was going to be like a super structured path to certain, you're going to be an accountant or it was like, you're going to be whatever you want to be. And, I had the opportunity to be whatever I wanted to be. And that did allow that fluidity, and I could just kind of go with the flow. And when I saw opportunities that might be good, and I did have a really sixth sense of what was going to be great, even though I didn't know that's what it was at the time. I chalked it up to luck. But really, if you look at my background and your background, it's a little bit more than luck in that we had an awareness of what was going to be important technologically in the future, and I've always tried to kind of stay, and you have too, on that sort of cutting edge of what's happening, even though you're not always successful. Like the
Oh,
first wave of
yeah.
people involved in these things definitely don't necessarily be the most successful, but you do come up with, I think, the most opportunities overall when you're fluid, like you mentioned.
I agree.
So let's go to the more gossipy portion of the podcast. In that, one of the things I found fascinating, and I know this isn't fair to you at all, but I found
Mhm.
fascinating about you is you lived in the Watergate in
I did.
DC.
I did. I
I
did.
have never known any real person outside of
Mm.
people that you've seen on TV that actually lived in the Watergate. So
Mhm.
tell us about that, because I know the audience is going to be interested to hear about
Ok
it.
okay, so this is the real deal. When I moved from Boston, this is where I had been before I went to AOL, and AOL's outside of DC. That's headquarters was outside of DC. It was actually located on a campus near Dulles Airport, so it was out
Yeah,
in the country in Virginia. And when they gave us a moving package to move, so my partner and I, we went to look for housing. And many of the people who worked in the organization, including all my bosses that had hired me, lived out in Virginia. They lived in West Virginia. I'm
yeah,
like, oh my God, in these rural places, places like Leesburg, the name Leesburg would turn me
yeah.
off anyway, Purcellville, and these other sort of places. And I was like, boy, and we looked at houses and other sorts of things. It was like, I don't think I can live like this in a snowstorm by myself with the lights having gone off, the electricity having failed, having to shovel driveways and that sort of thing. It just was, I couldn't believe it. So we were looking at yeah, at that point it was a newspaper, I guess. We were not even looking at online. We were looking at a newspaper. This is back in 2001. And in the sort of classified ads or something, there is a thing called the Watergate specialist. And these are people who specialize in the Watergate. It's like, well, the Watergate sounds expensive, whatever. It sounds as though we're not going to really love it, but let's go look at some apartments. And we went to look at units. And this is a brutalist set of buildings that had been built by an Italian architect, 5 different buildings. Some are office, one's a hotel, and then 3 are residential.
Yeah.
And they had been built over from like 1965 to say 1974. And it was an entire complex on the Potomac, just stuck in the middle of what probably had been swampland. Kind of looked over Georgetown and looked up the river, and we found a unit. It was just fantastic. And you didn't really know the Watergate, had heard about the Watergate because of the Watergate break-ins, but didn't know the Watergate, didn't know it as a community. So
Right.
we buy. And, it's like, thank goodness we're not way out in the country. We're now at the corner of the city, right next to the Kennedy Center, all that fantastic arts and culture. And then we began to realize where we have moved in, because downstairs has been this has been sort of the epicenter in the building in which we live, not just the whole complex, but the building in which we live. That's where Monica Lewinsky had lived. So Monica Lewinsky
Love
of
her.
Bill
Love her.
Clinton, Monica Lewinsky fame. It's like, okay, so this had happened here. And then downstairs also, there lived Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's like,
Awesome.
so here's Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her husband, the famed legal scholar. They live downstairs. And then Condoleezza Rice. So you're sitting in this building. And it's like, boy, this is and Robert McNamara lived there, old at the time, but still lived in that building. So you're like, this is a very strange combination. And the funny thing is, some people would stay, but it would often turn over when the
Yeah.
administrations change.
Right.
Someone has been living there and they've had a role, but now they're going back to their state or they're going someplace else. So then they leave. Elizabeth Dole lived there, and Bob Dole. So I'm like, it's just a hilarious place to be, but it's a community. And Placido Domingo lived there, so the opera singer. So you're like, it's like, what is this place? And then there's me, little old me, and my partner Michael. We're living there, but there were a bunch of also old Republican women, old Democratic women, people who'd been and really had lived there since its opening. So they had been there for 40 or 50 years and were just very committed to the space. I mean, we'd still live there. That was one of my favorite apartments ever. And we probably still lived there, but for opportunity, which took us over to London. And so,
Yeah.
you know,
It's an amazing part of your story, I think. I
mm-hmm.
mean, it's an untapped discussion point most of the time with you, but I think it's really an interesting thing, because being part of what they're calling Generation Jones now, I don't know if you know who this is, but it's like
No.
people born between 1956 and 1965 that don't relate to the boomers or Gen X.
Okay.
That's where we fall in.
Okay. Yeah.
Watergate was a pivotal part of our existence as
Exactly.
children. And so to hear somebody that actually lived there and had all of
Mm.
that going on is really cool. And you also were part of the Obama administration. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because you also don't talk about that very much.
No, I don't talk about it very much. The thing that I do, if I ever want to get credibility with someone, I tell people that although I went to law school with Barack Obama, I went to undergrad with Michelle Obama. So
Oh,
I have known Michelle longer than I've actually known Barack. And Michelle, I remember her as an undergraduate. She and my brother were in the same class. So they were seniors when I was a freshman.
at
And
Princeton, right?
at Princeton.
Yes.
And, just a lovely person. So it always
Yes.
sort of engaging a community, wanting to make sure that people who are younger and more vulnerable were taken care of. So, always been that same sort of person from the time I met her. And I didn't have that much association with her, but certainly knew her that way. And then Barack, first day of law school, I got a chance to meet him. And I remember the first time I saw Barack, I saw him outside of the classroom because we were in a group together. But when I saw him in the classroom, that's when you saw something very different. I could say to myself, he's not like me. There's something magical about him. Truly.
Yeah.
It's not that it's so, he's developed and cultivated over time. He's a smart person. He's worked very, very hard. But there is people who have star quality.
Yeah.
You've met those people. That one had he had star quality from the very beginning. But I was
Definitely.
privileged enough to be able to serve in the Obama administration on a small business administration committee. It was called a council, and this was looking at, there are all these programs to help people start off in life, and this kind of speaks to my work now as a venture capitalist. To start off their businesses, the Small Business Administration really intends to make sure that the engine that drives the American economy are these small businesses. And it's the same way in most countries around the world. It is small business that is really driving the economy. And after these organizations, especially those who are in and around DC, have gotten a supplier relationship with the government, have been able to get some set aside money or that sort of thing, they still have problems growing and fully scaling. So
Yeah.
our council was to look at how do you scale those organizations and make them less reliant upon single or over indexed for a single customer, and how to make them sort of be able to grow and employ more people, go outside of the borders of the United States and do other sorts of things. What was keeping them back? And what we found out was that access to capital was the thing. And this is if you are a woman, if you are a person of color in the United States, if you're a veteran, if you're a bit older and when you're starting out your career, and particularly if you have a disability. Those things are the capital is the thing which most at in need, and where do you get that? So that was what we looked at, and I was very proud of the work that we did. Kathy Hughes, the billionaire, a black female billionaire who was the head of that council, who she started Radio One and TV One, she and
Yeah.
her children. So that is the person who ran that. And I was great to serve under her and to watch how she managed a group of very opinionated people over a course of time to come up with a end product, a byproduct of all that work that was then very useful to the administration.
So do you think that you solved the problem? I mean, I would imagine a lot of our no, but was there any progress that was made with the problem? Because I'm sure a lot of us are That's okay. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are running into this, how do I get capital, which kind of segues into your travel across the pond, and the VC work that you're doing now. So I do think that this is something that's definitely worth uh, digging into a little bit more as a venture capitalist and as the small business.
So what we found is that that you can segment the groups into those who actually have businesses that are likely to be able to scale, software companies and others, because we are back in when I started this was in 2011, we are seeing sort of the full instantiation, Steve Chambers' favorite word that he taught me, instantiation of
I'll have to Google that one later.
yeah,
Go ahead.
technology organizations that actually are sort of driving the economy, and different kind of technologies than IBM, right? So these
Yeah.
are companies or different kinds of companies at Oracle or SAP. These are companies that are truly internet native and that are not requiring a huge amount of infrastructure costs and have huge margins. The kinds of businesses that we were generally seeing, the people that I talked about, women, people of color, and other vulnerable populations, they were not starting those sorts of businesses. They might have started a software business, but it was helping to manage supply chain for the military, for instance.
Yeah.
And those are some things can sometimes jump the shark tank and go from a military government relationship to become sort of a standard to be used in industry elsewhere. But
Yes.
generally, they have a tendency to be very sort of laser focused. And the government's a great customer to have, and it's a great payor. So there are those kinds of organizations, and that was one sort of an answer. You should be able to go to venture capitalists. You should be able to go to East Coast and West Coast venture capitalists to be able to get capital. And the question is, how do you just talk about the lessons that you've learned, the application that you have created or the solution you've created, and how it then applies more broadly, and you can go forward with that. But you might not even need money because as a payer, the government's a very good payer. And so you probably have cash that you can then use to reinvest yourself. So don't give up any money and go for third party sort of investment. So that's one end. On the other end are like services companies, cleaning services, landscaping, design services, and those sorts of things. Those companies are very people intensive.
Yeah.
and they are very labor centric. So those companies don't scale very well. There's no way that you're able to take the human out of those and replace them with technology, with bits and bytes. So for those, the question was, is there a way for the government to continue to underwrite working capital? Because those might need working capital for expansion, but it's not going to be huge scaling growth.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the solutions that we had. So quite frankly, I still think that one of the best things that came out of that organization, out of that council, was the idea that there are these sort of different segments that actually do exist, and that the solution for the person with that services company is really a banking solution. It's really a saving solution. It's really a revenue solution. And this is what we should be helping them with in order to be able to access those needs. And
Yeah.
then a fast growth technology company, it's a whole different thing.
Right. Right.
We need to stop thinking that there is a not even close to one size fits all. 10 sizes fit only 10 different sorts, but we probably have 100 segments that would be useful segments. And that if we really want to make a change, which means that at very least, all of these businesses are healthy, all of these businesses are self sustaining, all of these businesses stay out of administration in Chapter 11, this is what we need to do.
Awesome. Thank you. So you did move across the pond. You are a venture capitalist now. You're also an author and you were on a television show as well. When can you give us a little bit of update about what you're doing now, the challenges that you're finding? I know you're doing a lot with AI
Yeah.
as a VC, so would love to chat about that.
So let's again, no, let's stare down the bull, right? Here we
Yeah.
have a, economy that is booming in some ways and just not booming in others. So if you are
Yeah.
an AI company if you're looking at artificial intelligence driven solutions and that those are solving fundamental problems and helping with what is going to be the next wave of technology, those are the organization, and you're well connected. Those are the organizations which can raise capital, can get lots and lots of attention, can actually be in the news every day on the front page. And
Yeah.
they're competing with organizations like Netflix and others for page space. I mean, think about it. OpenAI is a private company, and I
Yeah.
mean, you hear so much about it. This is a new phenomenon that you hear so much about these private companies. Um, the
Hmm.
reason that I came over was because I was recruited to run another organization after during my time at Nuance and afterward. I've always been an operating executive. I've always been in the
Yeah.
C-suite of organizations, and they've been venture backed and trying to move from one level to another and then exit. So I did that successfully in the UK and have been recruited over to run one of those companies. And 2 years later, Microsoft bought us. So that was
Nice.
great. And then I went to another organization that was a health tech company as COO of that company. That company sold to Medtronic, another big international company. And so that was good. And then that's when I started the venture capital firm because I felt at that point I'd had 4 different exits to public companies in the United States and the UK. And that these organizations that I ran helped me to see sort of the development of organizations from seed. So when you have a product and you have a market, you have a little bit of a fit for that, but you don't have a lot of revenue and you need capital to scale, all the way to sort of Series B. You're scaling very greatly, but you probably need to go and look at other geographies and other sort of adjacencies in terms of market so that you can actually continue to scale and then compete a bit more broadly. I had those experiences now as an operating executive, and I've been able to raise capital with management teams and others to get more capital into the organizations, all from VCs. So the question was, should I actually then move into the VC space and then have a portfolio approach? And from that from that decision, which really wasn't even my own decision, this decision was because an actor in the UK said, you know what? We have got to solve this problem of poverty in the UK, particularly among people of color. Black children in the UK, 1 in 2 live below the poverty line. This is back in 2018 that these figures were released. And their white colleagues, their white peers, it's 1 in 5 children live below the poverty line. So there's this big disparity, but then there's also the problem of just poverty. So what do we need to do? And one of the decisions that was made by this actor and a group of his friends, 40 of his friends who convened in order to have a conversation was we need to have a fund or something where we can actually target capital to do catalytic things, but not charitable catalytic things, business catalytic things that can then have as a byproduct of it huge amounts of outflow of capital that can be used
Mm,
for a bunch of different things and can help seed the next generation of opportunity. That's how it started. I didn't start the idea itself. I then was asked to come in and create this organization. That's how I created it. And the actor's name is Lenny Henry, very famous here in the UK and known elsewhere because he was just in The Witcher. He was the star in The Witcher. He was a star in the prequel to the Lord of the Rings on Apple,
yeah,
or
well,
no, that wasn't Apple. That's on Amazon. And then he's also, on Harry Potter. He was in the Harry Potter movies. So he's well known. He's that
yes,
kind of an actor.
yes.
But and he's an institution here because he started Comic Relief that's gotten
Oh,
1.5 billion
yeah.
pounds in order to help with relief around the world of poverty. So he has a very big interest in poverty, helped to start this organization. I put it together. I chose the team. I chose the thesis. And then from there, have been able to, with this team, do a bunch of different things, investing in 50 companies and projects, being able to return capital, to be able to actually get some unicorns in our portfolio, and to be able to sort of change, I'm going to put it this way purposely, Susan, the complexion of UK and European VC because we tend to look where other people don't. We call ourselves ImpactX, and our thesis is that you want to have differentiated deal flow. So don't do what everyone else is doing. Do something which uses the same sort of good fundamentals of evaluation, but then look for people who are not getting the same opportunity. And that is going to be your alpha. That is going to create something that no one else can have because you are looking at those sort of organizations. But around them, clearly put around them the kinds of people, the value add people who can then substitute for
Help
all
them.
the isms. So just because there's a woman who starts a company and gets some money doesn't mean that sexism is gone and misogyny is gone. She
Oh, no.
still needs to get those contracts. She still needs to get those introductions into those spaces. So how do we make sure that happens? And so we have a value add component around us that allows us to then, we have people in our group who, if you say, I need we need to meet Apple and we need to meet Tim Cook, whoever says that. I mean, that's a crazy idea, but okay, good. That's what you need to do. Someone can help them to do that. That's the kind of access we want to be able to provide to these sorts of groups. And these vulnerable populations. So we invest in women, people of color. We invest in LGBTQ plus people with disabilities, older entrepreneurs. And we found it to be a great way to return capital to our investors, plus to create interesting companies that create jobs and opportunities for others.
That's awesome. Do you do this across the globe or strictly in England at this
We do
point?
the UK and Europe. You need to have a
Okay.
focus, right?
Yeah.
Because even with artificial intelligence, and like often it's good to have boots on the ground, and we can't
Hmm.
have boots on the ground everywhere. There's six of us who are the core team, and we're in San Francisco, San Diego, Colorado, London, Zurich, and Paris. Six of us, seven of us, if we count sort of some of the people who are a little less senior in the organization. And then what we do is we are looking not only at our local markets, but we're mainly focused on the UK and Europe in order to be able to say that this is also differentiated deal flow. There are a lot of VCs in Silicon Valley. There's a huge number of VCs
Yeah.
in New York and Boston. So, you know, looking at the same types of deals, looking at different sorts of innovators for those deals, and looking at a different geography are all ways that give you some differentiation.
That's awesome. So doing good is good business. And that's what I hear you're
And
saying.
doing good and doing well, right? So
Yeah.
you want to make sure because no one's going to give you more money unless they're
Right.
getting something out of it. So we have to return the capital, which is our primary responsibility.
I mean,
And
I hear this from a lot of VCs that they're going to do this, that, and the other thing for their individual investments, and then they don't, as far as PR and introductions and all of that stuff. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are really doing that. You have teams that do that kind of work because I think that's very important. I run into it a lot as a fractional CRO,
Mhm.
talking to these new companies, these tech CEOs, especially that don't have a real, sales or marketing type of background, and they're a little lost. So they definitely need the people that are investing in them to really invest in them in ways other than just financial, for sure. Otherwise, they're kind of left out in the cold a little bit. So that's awesome.
And Susan, have you noticed that in organizations, even when these individuals are get capital from generalist organizations, and we do the same thing. You make decisions about which kid you think is the most likely to win the race.
Yes.
And that's who gets the resources. And so if you've made it in the door and you've gotten capital, that's one thing. But to actually get the support you need, that's another one of the dirty little secrets around venture, that not everyone gets the same kind of attention and treatment because a determination is made fairly early that this is, and we have to do this because, you're trying to manage a portfolio and manage return. Is this the kind of horse that's going to really run?
Yes.
And are they gonna not just run? Can they actually win the Preakness Stakes? Can they win the Kentucky Derby? And so they have to win, and hopefully, and someone can this one win the Triple Crown? That's who we're really going to invest in. The other ones, certainly they get invited to everything, and certainly we will answer all their phone calls. But where we're proactively working all of the time and allocating our resources. And so, if you're a woman, person of color, one of these other sort of underrepresented populations in the venture capital portfolios of most generalists, venture capitalists, then you might find yourself, and I think we find this too frequently, on the losing side of that. You are not,
Yeah.
even though you're at the stable, you're not the horse that people believe is going to win the Triple Crown. So
Right.
you
And
get
I
what you
think, yeah, I think the other double-edged sword about that
get. Mhm.
is if you are the one that's winning the race,
Mhm.
you also have all of the money, which
Mhm.
means you can hire all of the really great people to kind of do those things.
Yes.
So it is a little bit of a setup. So, this is one of the, I do believe that you can win the race even if you're the underdog, if you have the best technology, you've got the right even if it's a small initial staff,
Mhm.
but you do need the people to support you one way or another as far as marketing and sales are concerned. Otherwise,
Right.
you're going to be dead in the water. And I didn't really realize that I should know this, but I didn't really realize that it's that blatant that they pick, like, all right, these are the few that we're going to put our resources in, and then the rest of these, if we get lucky, they might do something or sell
Right.
to someone. But of course, that's how it's done. I don't feel like the people that take the money realize that a lot of times. So, yeah.
I think most of us are just happy we got the money, right?
Yeah,
So most of
exactly.
us, it's
They're
like,
happy.
my goodness, I got through, I made it to that level, so I'm in
Right.
the club. But, there's always another. I remember a Frasier episode where Frasier and Niall are both, they keep on thinking that they get into a club and they think that there's something better behind another door. There's, like,
Yes.
part of the bronze level, but there's a silver level, and then there's a gold level, and then there's a titanium level, and eventually, they sort of find themselves out in a back alley. But we always, I think, we know in some ways that there are inner circles and inner circles and inner circles. And that's sort of what happens.
Yeah, I once had a boss say to me, "Susan, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others."
Mhm.
And that's exactly what you're talking about when it comes to VC investment. So that's really great information to share with the audience. Thank you for that, Eric.
My
All right,
pleasure.
one last thing. You were recently photographed with King Charles, as if your friends aren't enough. I was like, am I having a fever dream, or is that a picture of Eric Collins with
Mm,
King Charles? So this was you're an ambassador to the King's Trust.
I am.
Can you tell me what kind of impact that's making and what that was all about and where that was taken and all of that?
So there's a
And
young
if
man.
you say Buckingham Palace, I'm going to fall off my chair right
It's
now.
Buckingham Palace.
Oh my
Um,
God.
those are the state rooms for Buckingham Palace.
Wow.
And the young man who's in that picture is a Ugandan entrepreneur. And the reason I
Ah,
was there is because he is a recipient of a prize from the King's Trust. And that prize is recognizing him for his upcycling. So he takes plastic goods, and all over the world,
yeah.
plastic is littering and polluting everywhere. So takes those plastic goods and upscales them to sort of decorative items for the home, and then
Oh,
sells
cool.
them, and actually has I'm going to call it his atelier of maybe 150 people. It's a huge atelier who's doing all of this, and they're getting things like soda bottles and making vases from them. They're creating sugar bowls from mayonnaise containers, and then using paper mache and other things which are biodegradable around them to actually then construct and then paint non-lead based paint, and then using that, and then all of a sudden you have this very colorful environment. So the picture was actually taken by the staff photographer in Buckingham Palace on the day before I was then to present on television the award to this young man, and they were going to talk about those sorts, and they were going to talk about him, and there's a film about him and in his hometown outside of, big city, but he's not a small town guy, but he's not a big town and big city
Right.
guy either. I was very Pascal is his name. I was very impressed with that, and that the King's Trust, so the King's Trust is available to anyone between the ages of 16 and 30 for young people. It's been going on for 45 years. It'll be approaching its 50th anniversary soon, to help make sure that they are alleviating some of the poverty here in the UK. And I got involved because I'd had this television show. It's a spin-off. It's actually the format from The Prophet, a CNBC show in the United States. I was the prophet here. They changed the name to The Moneymaker. And that television show helped me to gain a bunch of profile here, which has been helpful in terms of deal flow, but then helpful for other reasons too, including getting capital to come into our fund. I was so I was selected by the King's Trust, then the Prince's Trust, because this is when Queen Elizabeth was still living and he was still a prince,
Mhm.
and then transitioned to the King's Trust when he became king, when he's elevated 2 years or so ago. I have to tell you a story about I have a story about that also, when this actually happened. Um, but what has allowed me, it has allowed me to see another group of entrepreneurs, because I only work with a business enterprise group, people who have running businesses where they're actually making capital. They're not for profit. These are for-profit organizations. And the King's Trust actually gives you a mentor 2 years, as well as there's capital that's involved, and this ongoing approach to training and the like, to make sure that you can stand up your business and make it work. Many people it remains a hustle, but some of them have actually grown to relatively large scale. That day that that picture was taken, I had a moment that was even better than, because I'd met
How?
the king before, but I walked in, and first of all, I got to drive into Buckingham Palace,
That's
and so I
cool.
drive in my car, and I get to park, and I'm like, and I didn't even know where to park. They just sort of waved me in. It's like, "Where do you park?" And so I went into, sort of the area where you see all of the kings and queens and presidents and other sorts of things come in. I parked there, and then I walk in, and who is the first person I run into? I see this glamorous woman, and that is Amal Clooney. I kind of recognize her, but then her
Oh,
husband turns around, and I recognize him for sure. And we're both Southern boys, right? He's from Kentucky. Both of
yeah.
us know tobacco and that sort of thing. He even knows Greensboro. But we struck up a conversation, and I spent a good amount of time talking about tobacco, farming, sort of seeing the world, raising children in various countries. It was a fascinating, but he's good at this. He's so charming and so warm in those sorts of ways. So there's on one side, there's Pascal, our entrepreneur, which is why we're there. Then there's the great convener, so the King of England, who's there, and then there's also George Clooney, who makes it all worthwhile. So it was all those sorts of things, all happened in the course of 10 minutes. It was quite a whirlwind day, but those
Incredible.
things happen when you get to be when you're the king. You can have anyone you want come
Anyone
visit.
you want.
Everyone wants to be there.
And by the way, she's brilliant.
Amal. Oh yeah, they give she
Amal.
gives an award, and Amal gives an award for young people who are working in social justice.
That's
And so
awesome.
she had a lovely woman who was working in terms of women's violence in Africa also, who was given an award by her. And Charlotte Tilbury, the makeup line,
Yes.
is the one who sponsors that one. But can I tell you
Very
this one little thing
sure.
that has to do with Queen Elizabeth? So I have this book, We Don't Need Permission, Penguin Random House. We arranged for there to be a book launch, and the book launch was going to be at Southwark Cathedral. Now, Southwark Cathedral, there are two cathedrals in London. Southwark Cathedral is south of the river. So the place where it was the poor side of the river and that sort of thing. It's St. Paul's, where Prince Diana and Prince Charles got married.
Yes.
That's the big cathedral, and that's sort of gets all the publicity. And then there's also Westminster Abbey, which is an abbey, but a different thing. The south, and London's huge. So South London is controlled by the Diocese of Southwark, and so by the Bishop of Southwark. And so I was fortunate enough for them to agree to let me have a book launch there. And we were doing this one, I think it was the 19th of September, I forget the exact date, and it was starting at 6 o'clock. That is the day, you won't remember this, but maybe some people will. That was the day and the hour when Queen Elizabeth was pronounced dead. We are getting ready to go on stage,
Oh,
at
no.
the Church of England, and she's in charge of the Church of England. So if this happens and the announcement happens, we have to the church goes into mourning. I was fortunate enough that 400 people had shown up for this book launch. I had another actor who was going to
Wow.
be in conversation with me and the dean of Southern Cathedral, Andrew Nunn. And just as we're getting ready to go out, this happens. And so all those people are sitting expectantly, and it's going to be a book signing, it's going to be a celebration. And suddenly it has to be canceled and turned into a period of mourning. So I was like, look at that. I have been upstaged by a queen. And I was like, it's just that's my life. That is my life. I'm so on the D list, but you know,
No, you're
and
not. No, you're not. Well, I think that that is a great spot to end our conversation, Eric. You have had a fascinating life, and there's still so much ahead of you. So I've really enjoyed talking to you today. It's
it's been
incredible
great
all the
talking to
things
you.
that you've done. If anybody wants to talk to Eric or I, hit us up on LinkedIn. We're both on there, or check out our website. You'll find our podcast everywhere in a short period of time. Thank you again, Eric. I really appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Susan. It's been a
Great discussion. Thank you for listening to Stare Down the Bowl. If today's conversation sparked new ideas, share it with a colleague and keep the momentum going. The future belongs to leaders who act, so subscribe and join us again next week.